Today I am reading Order again. Beautiful book, if I do say so myself. I am super excited to be reading this again. But ow, jaw spasm. I am feeling a lot better. I had sinus problems Friday and a massive migraine on Wednesday, but I'm feeling better. All right. So in here, we're reading about 3, maybe 4 chapters, and if you haven't read the book already, this is where you get to know some important information that will leave you asking questions unless you get the book and read ahead or you have already read it. So I'm excited. Shall we get started? So today is episode 10. We're reading chapters 29 through 32. So 4. Chapter 29, The Mystery Peaks, Katerina. I was sitting at a table in the inn waiting for Dimitri to get back. Travis was keeping an eye out from outside the inn to make sure that no one came inside the inn to harm me. Outside, I saw a group of people in robes. They were standing and talking outside of a store across the street. I tilted my head as I looked at them, wondering what was up with the robes. I saw the woman that ran the inn and I waved her over. Who are the people in those robes? The woman looked up and I saw them. Those are members of the Order of the Watchful Eye. They have powers like seeing the future, the power of the elements, and other powers. No one but the Order knows what other powers they have. There are 2 factions in this land, the Order and the Renegades. She looked back at me. Those of us in neither faction don't really understand what either faction wants. Maybe one day both factions can be in the same room and come to an understanding. However, without someone to lead us, we can't find a balance. She started to walk away when I saw someone familiar. I ducked down out of sight before peering out of the window as I tried to see if Daniel saw me. It didn't look like he had. "What's wrong?" the innkeeper asked. "He's a man that we've been searching for," I replied, looking out as Daniel walked down the road with another man. "He killed my father and then kidnapped my niece." I stood up and went out the front door of the inn. Travis turned to look at me. "There's Daniel. I'm following him to see what he's up to. You can come with me or stay here. Your choice." My eyes sparkled in mischievousness. "That's no choice," he said, chuckling. "I'm going with you, but we're only going to see what he's up to. Then we come back to the inn to discuss what to do next. Okay?" "All right," I said. We walked down the street, keeping an eye on Daniel and his companion. I thought I saw someone that looked like Dimitri out of the corner of my eye, but I dismissed the thought. We followed Daniel and his companion up the hill, and I saw the 2 men enter a shed. Travis and I looked at each other before we started forward towards the shed. We tiptoed to the window and peered in. Something was blocking most of the window, so it gave us coverage and let us see part of what was going on. Daniel's companion was walking back and forth in between the rows of girls. I saw 24 girls sitting on the floor of the shed. When Daniel started pacing, we checked to make sure we were still hidden. "What do you think they're saying to the girls?" I asked. Travis shook his head. "I don't know." I looked back into the shed. to see Daniel's companion cracking the whip at the floor in front of the girls. "We need to go back to town. Now. We need a plan." "Yes, Your Highness," Travis said. He led the way back to the town, where I went up to my room to get some paper and writing tools. The dove that came with us flew over to land on my shoulder. I walked back down to the main part of the inn where Travis was. "I'm going to ask Frederick if he knows anything about the order." When Travis nodded, I quickly pinned the letter to my brother. Sending the letter off with the dove, I noticed that Dimitri and Terence walked into the inn. "Hey guys," I said, waving them over. "You won't believe what we saw." Dimitri came over and sat beside me. "Did you know that Daniel was here in this inn?" His voice was a little frantic, showing his worry over me. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I saw him, and Travis and I followed him and his companion. We followed them to a shed and saw about 24 girls in there with them. I don't know what the girls were doing there. But Daniel's companion snapped a whip at the ground in front of them. I've just sent a letter to Frederick to see if he knows anything about the order, and I added that we saw Daniel. Nothing more." "You followed that guy?" Dimitri's jaw dropped. I looked at him with a look of, "You're going to seriously think that I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to do everything?" As I said, "Yes, with backup, I might add." Terence leaned over and whispered in Dimitri's ear, "You're in a danger zone. She's giving you that look." "What look?" Dimitri asked as Travis and I stared at the two of them. "The look of, you better not think that I'll just sit here when I could be doing something to help catch the bad guy. If you do try to stop her, she might just keep you from sharing her bed," Terence said with a laugh in his voice. Dimitri looked back at me, and when I raised an eyebrow, he said, "I'm sorry that I reacted the way I did. I'm glad that you were safe and that you didn't get caught. They didn't see you, correct?" "I don't think they did, or else they would have run out to try and grab us." I shook my head. "Okay, then," Dimitri said. At the thought that he was trying to placate me and get back into my good graces. "We have to come up with a plan," I said to the group. "And then I want to speak to you alone," I said, giving Dimitri a hard look. He gulped. I smirked. We discussed things for an hour, snacking on the things that Terence and Dimitri had brought back. We decided to gather intel in the next few days while we waited on Frederick's response, and then we would move on to Daniel and his companion. After the conversation was over, I grabbed Dimitri by the ear and led him upstairs, listening to the laughter of anyone watching us. Once we were inside our room, I let go of Dimitri's ear and shut the door behind us. "Are the rooms soundproof?" "Yes. I asked the innkeeper when you were taking your nap." He looked at me warily, wondering what I was up to now. I smirked at that. Thank goodness. Do you know how I have wanted to get you alone for so long?" He relaxed when he understood what I meant. Then he walked over to me and kissed me gently. I buried my fingers in his hair as our kiss deepened. I heard the lock click into place before his hands were upon me. Our clothing was flung to the ground as we made our way to the bed. My body was on fire as he kissed his way down my torso. My mind blanked as I surrendered to his ministrations. Afterwards, I lay half on his chest with the blankets over us. I ran a hand through his hair as I relaxed. His hand ran up and down my back. "What do you want to do in the next few days?" I asked him. "I don't know," he answered, his chest vibrating with each word. "Whatever you want to do is fine with me." "Well, while we gather intel, we could go on a few dates and explore the town." I smiled. I snuggled into his hold as we continued talking about the next few days. Chapter 30. Information gathering. Frederick. I looked up at the dove that flew into the dining room. It was unusual that we got any kind of letters during dinner. The dove flew over to me and I gently took the letter from her. Thank you. It may take a few days to recover while I read the letter and write a reply. The dove flew off, most likely to the room I had specifically made for our doves. What does it say, love? Natalia asked me. Katerina wants to let us know that she saw Daniel in the new land. She also asked if I know about a group called the Order. I said, folding the letter back up. I wanted you to read the letter out loud, not summarize. Natalia frowned as she looked at me from the other end of the dining table. I sighed as I unfolded the letter. She says, Hello, brother. We have successfully arrived in the new land. Yeah. I had to rest as soon as we arrived because of a case of motion sickness. Dmitri and Terence explored the town. Later, when I was feeling better, Travis and I saw Daniel and another man, and we decided to follow them to see what they were up to. We followed the two men to a shed where we saw 24 girls inside. I don't know why the girls were there, but Daniel's companion snapped a whip at them. Dmitri, Travis, Terence, and I will spend the days until we hear from you, just trying to find out about these girls and what Daniel might be wanting with them. Oh, Frederick, do you know anything about a group of people called the Order of the Watchful Eye? Apparently, they have special powers. For example, I have heard that some can see the future, and some can work with the elements. While you ask around in more, we'll be asking the people here. I love you all, Katerina. That's it. I looked up and said, I'll ask Julie tomorrow if she knows anything about this order. I think this is a good idea, Natalia said. She took a drink as she thought about the letter. It seems very suspicious that Daniel and his partner have girls hidden in a shed. What are they planning? I don't know, love. I put the letter aside as we went back to eating. I was lost in thought, but I noticed that my brothers and my mother were pensive as well. After dinner, Thomas stood up and spoke to Derek and Blake. Come on, you two. Let's get you ready for bed. He was stepping up to help Mother out. I smiled and nodded to him. He nodded back. George said, I'm going to get ready for bed as well. After I check on Gareth, though. I nodded. Okay, good night. Good night, brother, George replied as he left the dining hall. Mother stood up with Adeline. I'm going to go as well. You will find the answers you need, son. I believe in you. Good night, she said, kissing my forehead as she passed me. Good night, Mother. Natalia and I sat there for a while, just talking about what I was going to do in the morning, until Elizabeth started whining for her bed. I smiled before I asked, Shall we also head to bed, my dear? Natalia nodded and stood up, carrying Elizabeth over to me. Let's, she said, smiling. We made our way to our quarters, where Natalia got Elizabeth into her nightclothes and into her cot. Natalia and I then got ready for bed ourselves. The next morning, after breakfast, I walked down to the village and over to the bakery. I had made sure that Julie now had helpers around the shop, and that she was taken care of. It was the least that I could do for her. I opened the door to the bakery and was greeted by the young man loading the trays of baked goods into the display case. Your Majesty, welcome. How may I help you today? Is Julie around? I asked. She's in the kitchen. Is there anything else I can help you with? He looked up at me with respect and awe. I glanced around the bakery. It looked a little bare, but like it was being reset in the design aspect. I'll take 2 cakes. The first one I would like to be vanilla. The other will be chocolate. Thank you. I said, putting the money down on the counter. Then I walked to the kitchen saying, I'll be back in a few. Julie was kneading dough for her bread when I walked into the kitchen. There was also a young man standing beside her making more bread. Julie didn't turn to see who was walking into the kitchen before she spoke. Are you done putting the baked goods in the display case already, young man? When your new boss is ready to take over, you can't be coming in here every 10 minutes with questions. You're giving up the business? I asked. She turned around suddenly, and the young man beside her slowly followed her lead. Your Majesty, she said, curtsying and getting flour on her dress and apron. I'm giving the bakery to my son here. She motioned to the man beside her. He was apparently her youngest child and about my age. I see. And where will you go? I asked. I was worried about her. Julie looked at me sadly. I don't know, Your Majesty. I just don't think I'll be able to stay in the bakery without my husband. An idea hit me at that moment. What if there was another land for you to go and relax? A thoughtful look lit her face. What would I do there? Julie asked me. Whatever you want to do, I replied. There are a few questions that I want to ask you, but they don't have anything to do with the bakery. What kind of questions? She asked as she went back over to kneading the dough for the bread. Have you heard anything about the group called the Order of the Watchful Eye? I asked her. I saw her back stiffen. What's wrong? My mother and father came from that other land before I was born. They didn't like the discrimination between the two groups of people there. But enough about that. The Order of the Watchful Eye, or the Order, is a group of people with special powers, like my mother. My mother had visions, true visions. She could see the past, present, and future. That's also the reason that my parents came here. Mother knew that I would one day help guide Princess Katerina into the woman she is today. Julie stopped talking for a minute while she put the bread dough in a bowl and covered it with a cloth to rise. While I did inherit a part of my mother's gift, it only came out in the tarot cards and sometimes in my baking. She looked at me with a small smile. It made some of my baked goods give people a boost when they were tired, or gave them a little happiness on a sad day. Oh, I said. I now knew why her baked goods were extra special. Before, I just thought that she had a secret ingredient spice that she added while the food baked. So, the Order is just a group of people with powers? They also have some strict views on right and wrong when it comes to their members, Julie replied. She frowned. Chapter 31. 31. Missing Girls, Dimitri. I walked downstairs the next morning and found Terence and Travis sitting at a table for four, with strong coffees in front of them. As I walked over, Travis looked up and smirked. What? I asked. His smirk widened before he replied. How much did she disappoint you? I blushed a little when I thought about last night. No way! Terence looked at me in shock. You lucky guy. She didn't punish you, she rewarded you. He started laughing. To my horror and embarrassment, Travis joined his brother in laughing. Shut up, I muttered, sitting down with them and waving over one of the ladies working at the inn. May I have a strong cup of coffee, please? Sure, she said with a grin. She sauntered away, but my eyes had already gone back to my companions. I noticed that Terence was staring in her direction, and so I said, if you like her, woo her. Terence looked at me. I don't have a chance with her. All her attention was on you. I'm married, I smirked. True, Travis said as the woman came back with my coffee. Terence looked up at her face as she stepped up to our table. Here you go, hun, the woman said, placing my coffee before me. Can I get you anything else? She smiled at me when I looked up at her. No, thanks, I smiled. I'm sorry, miss, but I'm married. She looked disappointed, so I said, my friend Terence is available. I motioned to Terence as I said that. I watched as she turned her head to look at Terence. Terence smiled at her. Hi. His eyes were on hers and did not move down her body. I knew that was a point in his favor. I smiled. Hello, she said. She had also noticed that his eyes didn't wander, and so she smiled at him. She was called away, but she gave Terence another glance. See? Maybe she just didn't pay attention to the people of the table earlier. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. She did seem distracted earlier, said Travis. He sipped at his coffee to wake up. Terence smiled. He drank some of his coffee as well, as a figure came downstairs and into the dining area. The other guests of the inn quieted down slightly, but I didn't pay attention to them. I was still talking with our guards. One guy behind us said, Hey, beautiful, why don't you come join us? Katerina shook her head at the man as she made her way over to our group. I looked up as she neared. Katerina stopped next to me, her hair in a loose braid down her back. Good morning, love, she said before kissing me on the lips. I smiled. I kissed her back before pulling away. Good morning, wife. I noticed the other guests looking disappointed and going back to their food. Looking back at Katerina, I noticed the sparkle of amusement in her eyes. Please, sit down and let's eat. She said. She walked over to the only free chair and sat down. Another serving girl came over to take our food orders and Katerina's drink order. Omelets all around and a tea for the lady. Got it. I'll be back as soon as possible. I smiled as Travis teased Katerina about not punishing me last night. While Katerina did blush a little, she teased him back, but saying that he was just jealous that he didn't have a woman. I chuckled at her barb. Katerina, would you like to explore the town with me? Of course, she said. Let's eat first, and then we can go check out the stores that you saw earlier. I nodded. Okay, I said. It wasn't long until we got our omelets and Katerina's tea. We continued to chat as we ate, wondering what we were going to do in the next few days. When we were done eating, I paid for the meal and offered my arm to my wife. Why, thank you, she said, sliding her hand between my arm and my side to place her hand on my forearm. Lead the way, my handsome husband. I smirked at her. Of course, my lovely wife. Newlyweds, Terence said as he shook his head, laughing quietly. Travis patted his brother on the shoulder. I led the way outside of the inn and to the right as I walked to a little shop of stationery. Katerina was looking around happily, and I smiled at her expression. I bought her some stationery that she expressed an interest in and got a smile in return. We walked over to the next shop that had little knickknacks. Katerina said, I only want to look around. We can get souvenirs when we get ready to head back. Okay, I agreed. Then we walked inside and looked around. There were many little figurines of animals everywhere. I thought about the people back home that would probably like a souvenir from this new land. We kept walking around the town, looking at everything, and made it to the store across from the inn. I heard people talking about missing girls, and I walked over to them. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear you saying something about missing girls. They looked at me suspiciously until one of the women recognized me from yesterday. Oh, it's you. How is your wife feeling? She's doing much better, I said. I looked back at Katerina and motioned her over. This is my wife, Katerina. It's a pleasure to meet you, Katerina said, curtsing slightly. The women looked at her a little shocked, but greeted her anyway. Then the woman I was speaking with earlier continued to speak. We were discussing the fact that girls have been missing from all over the land, not just this town. Kidnapped? I asked. We think so, she said. I felt Katerina walk away to a table and saw her pull her cards out of her secret pocket. I knew what was on her mind. The missing girls were probably the same girls that Katerina saw yesterday. Is she doing a tarot reading? Asked one woman. Yes, I said. She's probably trying to see the fate of the girls. I turned back to them, and we continued to talk, as I asked questions about the ages of the girls taken, and how many were from the town itself. Chapter 32. The Order. Katerina. I started shuffling my deck of tarot cards. I needed to find out more about these girls and their fate. I started putting cards down on the table before me until 7 cards lay face up. My eyes were on the cards, so I didn't see the group of people staring at me. The first card was the 6 of Pentacles in the reversed position. That card showed turmoil, uncertainty, and hidden hope. That seemed realistic about what was happening right now. The second card was the 9 of Pentacles. It represented a woman alone, someone who was proud of her achievements, at peace with herself, and a calm period. The third card was the Sun in the reversed position. It had the meaning of a thirst to prove oneself, adventure seeking, and a search for justice. The Hierophant was the fourth card, and it showed spiritual knowledge, a mentor, and a greater purpose in life. The reversed position of the 5 of Wands gave a hint to inner conflict and a decision to be made. The Death card showed rebirth, a sense of something that must end, be it a literal or metaphorical death. The 7th card was a bit of a mystery. It showed that something is no longer working, that it was time to move on, and hinted at the door of no return. As I reshuffled the cards, I was lost in thought, not only thanking the cards, but also thinking about how we could get through the current situation. I was brought out of my thoughts by a voice coming from my left. Looking up, I saw a group of people wearing robes. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What did you say? The young lady before me spoke up. Don't worry about it. I asked if you actually believe in the cards and have the power of sight. I frowned. I don't know anything about powers, but I do believe that the cards tell me things about the present and the future. Is it possible that you do have powers, but just haven't been trained? Asked another person behind the young girl. I looked up at them. Anything is possible. Growing up, there was one other person that used the cards to see into the future. The robed people looked at each other before looking back at me. The tallest of the group said, "If you don't mind, would you like to come with us to learn about any powers you might have and about the order itself?" I thought about it and looked over at Dmitri. He was looking at me as well. I tilted my head. He glanced at the people with me and nodded to me. I smiled. "Be careful," he mouthed to me. I nodded. I turned to the order members. "Okay, I will go with you." "You just had a silent conversation with that guy?" asked the young girl. "He's my husband," I said. I smiled at her shock. I followed the order members to a house behind the town's stores. We stepped inside the house after I glanced around. It was a quaint house, with ivy climbing up the side of the building. The windows were flanked by bright white shutters against a reddish brick wall. The door, I noticed as they opened it, was a dark green, almost black. Inside, the house opened immediately into the living room, where I saw more members of the order. "Why have you brought a stranger into my house?" asked one woman, as everyone else kept staring at me. "Sorry, Lady Donica," said the man in the group with me. He removed his hood. "We brought her here because we believe that she has powers, and we wanted her to meet you, so that you could test her and tell her about the order." Donica walked over to me and lifted my face so she could look at me clearly. She was apparently looking for something because she nodded and said, "Follow me." She led me into the dining room where a small round table stood with 2 chairs on opposite sides. Donica sat down and motioned for me to take the other chair. When I sat, Donica said, "You are a visiting princess." Some people gasped. "Pick a card." A set of tarot cards appeared in the middle of the table. I looked at the cards as they spread themselves out face down. Something weird was going on. I took a deep breath and focused. The card I chose would lead to answers, so I had to choose carefully. With my eyes closed, I reached out to pull a card away from the others. Doing so, I then opened my eyes to look at the woman before me. The cards that I didn't choose stacked themselves neatly. "Here," I said, sliding the card that I chose to her. "Thank you," she said, taking the card. She flipped it up, and we both looked at the card. It was the Magician card. "You have strong powers and a bright future ahead of you. You will be a leader that others look up to for many years to come." She looked up at me and met my eyes. "You can make a difference with your powers. Do you have any questions?" "Not about the card. It will reveal its meaning more clearly as I go along. However, I do have a few questions about the order itself," I said. "Go ahead." Danica sat up straight, watching me as another woman brought us tea. "Thank you, daughter." "You're welcome, mother," the woman replied. She put my tea in front of me. "Thank you." "You're welcome," she replied, smiling at me. I turned back to Donica. "What is the order really? And what do you hope to accomplish in this land?" Donica laughed gaily. "The Order of the Watchful Eye is a group of men and women that have special powers. We try to help other people in whatever way we are able to, although there are a few in the order who wish to rule over the people to control them." "Control them how?" I asked. She shook her head. "I wonder about that myself." And the second question: "I hope to unite the people of the land and move towards the future. What the future holds, I'm not sure." I nodded, thinking about her answers. "Come to think of it, the people of the order that want to control the normals have similar beliefs to the renegades." Danica saw my look of confusion and continued, "The renegades are people of high skill in trades that want to make a better living than they already do, and they are willing to step over people to get what they want." I said, thinking over the news that I had received. "You gave me a lot to think about. There's a lot more, isn't there?" I tilted my head, trying to figure the order woman out. "Yes, and we are willing to teach you if you want." Danica looked me in the eye. "Of course." I looked at the people around us. When would we start? And what kind of things would you teach me? I thought about it and said, on second thought, I have something that I need to finish first. Then I can start learning about my powers. "We can start whenever you are ready. First, we would help with meditation. Then we would work on seeing if you have an affinity for the elements. If so, we will continue to practice that until you master it. If not, we will find something else for you to learn." If I may, what do you need to finish first? Donica asked curiously. My husband and our two companions came to this land to find a man named Daniel and his business partner. Daniel killed a king, kidnapped the next king's daughter, and escaped from a workers' camp. I'm here to bring justice to them. My eyes narrowed. They have some girls with them, and now I'm wondering if they are the same missing girls. We did hear of missing girls, Donica said. And my second daughter is one of the girls missing. Maybe you'll find her there. I hope so. I hope so too. I looked around once more and said, I'm sorry, I must go. That is the end of today's reading, and Wednesday we learn even more about what's going on with the missing girls, and we find out what happens to Daniel. All right, I hope you enjoyed that reading. Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see how it goes from there. Thank you. All right, thank you for joining me today, and I shall see you Wednesday. All right, bye.